Okay, think about this legal paradox for just a second. How exactly can a parent be convicted of murder when they absolutely didn't pull the trigger? It's a massive question, and it really challenges our fundamental understanding of criminal responsibility. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a case that has sparked intense conversations all over the country about parental liability, the tragic shooting at Apalachee High School. We're going to look right past the sensational headlines and dig deep into the actual statutes to understand exactly how the law applied so differently to two members of the exact same family. Here is our roadmap for This Explainer. Section 1, the two Grays. Section 2, defining criminal negligence. Section 3, the path to murder. Section 4, comparing the sentences. And finally, Section 5, the verdict's actual limits. Let's get right into it. Section 1, the two Grays, a father, a son, and two legal theories. When you break it down, the contrast in both the charges and the outcomes is just stark. Colin Gray, the father, faced a full trial. He was convicted of second-degree murder and involuntary manslaughter, landing him a 15-year sentence. Meanwhile, Colt Gray, the son, took a plea deal that encompassed a staggering 55 different charges, which resulted in life without parole. We're looking at two members of one family receiving wildly different sentences, basically because they were held responsible for completely different conduct under entirely different legal theories. But before we dive into the dry legal analysis of the statutes, it is absolutely essential that we ground ourselves in the human cost at the center of this case. 4 people lost their lives at Apalachee High School. 2 students, Mason Schermerhorn and Christian Angulo, and 2 teachers, Richard Aspinwall and Cristina Irimie. It's their tragic, senseless deaths that triggered the legal proceedings we're examining today, and we absolutely have to keep them in mind as we analyze how the justice system responded. Section 2, defining criminal negligence, the legal hinge of the case. To really grasp how Colin Gray was convicted, we have to look incredibly closely at how Georgia Code Section 16570 defines negligence. This is the absolute crux of the matter. We aren't talking about being a generic, quote-unquote, bad parent or making a simple, everyday mistake. Not at all. Criminal negligence is strictly defined here as an act or even a failure to act that causes a child cruel or excessive physical or mental pain. Because this specific statute governs second-degree cruelty to children, the parent's legal liability stems directly from a negligent action that directly results in severe harm. Now, what's really interesting here is that the prosecution didn't argue that Colin Gray wanted the shooting to happen. Instead, they tied his liability directly to his criminal negligence in providing access to the firearm. The jury essentially had to sit down and decide, did leaving that weapon accessible, especially under the specific circumstances and warning signs that were present, meet that super strict threshold of an act or omission that constitutes criminal negligence under Georgia law? They found that it did. Section 3, the path to murder, from negligence to homicide. Let's move along and see how this actually builds into a really unique legal cascade. It's almost like a domino effect. Step 1 is proving that base level of criminal negligence we just defined. Once you have that, Step 2 requires showing that this negligence clearly meets the criteria for second-degree cruelty to children. And then, Step 3 is where Georgia Code Section 16-5-1 comes into play. In Georgia, a person commits second-degree murder when they cause another human being's death during the commission of second-degree cruelty to children. And here is the real kicker. Second-degree murder in this specific context does not require malice. It literally doesn't require any intent to kill. It simply requires the death to stem directly from that underlying criminal negligence. Which naturally brings up a fascinating question about the verdict. Why exactly was Colin Gray convicted of both second-degree murder and involuntary manslaughter? Well, the answer lies in the sheer complexity of the evidence. The prosecution had to prove exactly how specific negligent acts connected to the different victims. For some charges, the jury agreed the evidence met that really high bar of second-degree murder via cruelty to children. But for others, they applied the theory of involuntary manslaughter. It really goes to show that the jury was meticulously evaluating the exact chain of causation, essentially victim by victim, act by act. Section 4, comparing the sentences, breaking down the outcomes. The completely diverging outcomes here really just come down to the type of proceeding. Colt Gray's sentence resulted from a massive guilty plea to 55 distinct charges, ending in life without parole. He completely waived his right to a trial. Colin Gray, on the other hand, went through a full trial, where a jury had to carefully weigh his criminal negligence. So his 15-year sentence wasn't just some random number pulled out of a hat. It was the result of the judge carefully structuring the penalty, count by count, based directly on the exact convictions of second-degree murder and manslaughter that the jury handed down. Now, you might be wondering, given the absolute severity of Colt Gray's actions, why life without parole and not the death penalty? Well, a quick look at Supreme Court history explains the constitutional boundaries at play here. Back in 2005, Roper v. Simmons made it unconstitutional to execute anyone for a crime committed when they were under 18. Later, in 2012, Miller v. Alabama ruled out mandatory life without parole for juveniles. However, fast forward to 2021, and Jones v. Mississippi clarified that judges can still impose life without parole on a juvenile, provided they conduct a specialized, individualized sentencing process. Because Colt Gray was under 18, the death penalty was completely off the table, but the judge used that exact individualized process to hand down the life sentence. I'm sure you've probably heard of the Crumbly case up in Michigan, where parents were also convicted following a school shooting. But listen, these cases are absolutely not identical. Michigan relied on entirely different state statutes, different theories of causation, and totally different factual evidence regarding the parents' conduct. The Gray case down in Georgia relied specifically on this unique combination of Georgia's criminal negligence, cruelty to children, and second-degree murder laws. We really can't view them as one big uniform legal standard because they're just not.
Section 5. The verdict's actual limits. What this does not mean.
So, the crucial takeaway here, and stick with me on this, is that this verdict does not establish automatic parental liability for what a child does. It does not mean guilt by association or relationship. It certainly does not mean that every single case of an unsecured firearm automatically equals a murder charge. And finally, because criminal law varies so much from state to state, this absolutely does not create some uniform national legal precedent. This verdict is strictly, purely about a jury finding proven criminal negligence under highly specific Georgia laws based on the exact conduct of Colin Gray in this one specific instance. Which kind of leaves us with this final, lingering thought. We've just seen how Georgia law meticulously chained criminal negligence all the way up to a murder conviction in this specific tragedy. But as legal theories continue to evolve state by state, under what exact circumstances will that line of criminal negligence be drawn for parents in future cases? It's an incredibly complex, challenging question, and it's one that will undoubtedly shape the legal landscape for years to come. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning the facts, and I'll catch you next time.